Okay, this should be working. Okay. I see a lot of new people around, so I want to make a video about how you should draft. Well, not how you should draft, it's how I would draft. Now, I'm not the best player, but I'm not the worst, which means I'm better than some and worse than others. For that reason, I will be your teacher today. What is draft? I mean, I'm going to assume you have basic knowledge of competitive Pokemon, or at least kind of basic, oh, I know what stealth rocks are, I know what a type chart is. Basically, I mean, competitive sixes is, you want to be switching a lot, you want to make sure that you always have a play, you want to make progress. Now, none of that makes sense to a normal person, so let me actually explain it. There's different types of teams. Either you want to be mating, you either want to be, like the end goal is beat their 6 Pokemon. You can do it in any way possible. You can either chip them down, you can hit them with really hard hits, or you can do somewhere in between. If you want to hit them really hard, then you'll want Pokemon like Landorus, Therian with very high attack, Latios with very high special attack. If you want to be chipping them down, you might want something like Tapu Koko or Tornadus, which are very fast, so they're able to get a lot of hits in. And if you're doing somewhere in between, maybe look at something like Zeraora, with a reasonably high attack and good moves to hit things with, but it's also fast enough to be able to Volt Switch on a lot of things. Pivoting is very important in Pokemon, because you always want to maintain advantage for as long as possible, and being in an advantageous position means generally having a type advantage. Now, I said I assume you know what the type chart is. Generally, you want to be super effective against what you're in against, but also, as long as you're resisting the hits that are coming your way, that's usually a good thing. It's for this reason that, while Fire isn't super effective against Fairy, Fire types are seen as a pretty good Fairy check. So something like Victini, you may not think of it initially, but Victini is a very good way of switching into Tapu Lele, and its fire attacks still threaten it out. And however, something like Heatran is actually a little worse, because it can get Focus Blast, and that hits for a lot against Heatran. And you expect Heatran to come in, so you're able to clish it a bit more, but if you have Victini, locking Shadow Ball is pretty tough to do. That's just how you should be augmenting all of your mons, though. You should be thinking, okay, even something as frail as Katana, it's frail specially, but physically, that's taking hits. It can take physical water types, like Azu for a day raid. It can even switch into something like Rotomosh sometimes, but it's generally not advised because, it's very vulnerable to status and stuff like that, and, you just have to know how to get as much value out of your Pokemon defensively as well as offensively. And Draft is very big on that, because in Draft you know what you're facing. On Ladder, when you're playing Overused, you may be thinking, oh, well, I have my Zapdos, it's supposed to be beating Landorus, it's supposed to be beating Zeraora, etc., Rillaboom, whatever. But in Draft, you're not always fighting them. You have to think, okay, my Zapdos is beating Ferrothorn, but I can't bring it in too early, because if it gets toxic by Ferrothorn or knocked off by Ferrothorn, then that means it's going to be worse at checking the Tapu Bulu I'm facing. Let's assume they have 2 grass types, and one of them is Bulu. Anyway. Yeah, that's kind of it. I haven't really explained anything, but I hope you all understand. I'm going to make a few sample teams, because I think it's probably easier for me to explain my thought process if I just start building. First things first, you just want to think of a mon you want to use. Like, there's nothing else to it, it's just, a lot of these are very good, they're good for different reasons, just what do you want to use? Now, I haven't used Koko. Well, I have actually used Koko pretty recently, but it's a fun mon, it's a good mon. Koko, I think, is one of the best in Draft. For a lot of reasons. I think the main one being its access to U-turn as a fast electric type. Kind of exclusive to it at this speed anyway. Zapdos has it at base 100, and look, it's at 17 points. Koko has a really good defensive type with Electric Fairy. It only has 2 weaknesses, quite a lot of resistances, and overall is just really good at coming in and out and just getting chip on things. It's a type of playstyle which invites a lot of hard hitters to be enabled by Koko. It's why You may hear a lot about maybe Coco Hydreigon, or Coco Mega Medichap, or etc. Ad infinitum. Coco pairs really well with a lot of slower wall breakers, which just want to hit the enemy as hard as possible. Let's just go through the list. Pairs really well with Lando, pairs really well with Victini, pairs really well with Aegislash, pairs well with Hydreigon, pairs well with Kyurem. Well, it's okay. Some of these are, types always affected as well, Coco, generally, you're thinking what's coming on it? Ground types, steel types, and grass types, usually. Steel types because they resist U-turn and Dazzling Gleam. Ground types because they're immune to electric and don't really care about U-turns most of the time. And grass types because, while they are weak to U-turn, U-turn generally doesn't do that much damage, so the resistance to electric is usually enough. For that reason, thinking about those three types in particular, I think I'm going to pair Coco with Infernape. Now, Infernape's a really good one. You might look at its stats and think, oh, it's a little underwhelming. But it's fast, it's strong, it has power on both sides, and one of the best move pools out there. I really like it. So, luckily I've got stuff set up on this slide here. The sprites aren't really working because it's quite small. But either way, you can see Coco there, its feet anyway. I'll widen it just for this demonstration. Yeah, just like that. Actually, no, it's 5. Either way, Coco and Infernape. Good call, Infernape can break waters easier with Coco's electric terrain. Coco can break the waters for it. Infernape also kind of annoyed by ground types as well, but it does do damage. Same with Coco. Coco might have ground types come in, but it does have access to Grass Knot, which is a very useful move for it, because it lets it punish a lot of ground types, as well as its stab Dazzling Gleam, obviously. So these two pair well, great. I mean, there's not much that wants to come in on these two. However, there is still some stuff. I'd say poison types can be annoying. Poison types resist fighting, resist fairy, neutral to electric and fire, so maybe if it was Poison Dragon, like Dragalge, that really annoys this. I mean, Coco has Gleam to hit that neutrally, of course, and Infernape has EQ. You're generally going to find with a lot of these, oh, this one has this coverage, or this one has this coverage. There's really not much that annoys these two, except maybe some more generic stuff. Bulky grounds can still get in the way, even if Grass Knot's there. Let's say something like Lando. Lando C. Good answer to both. Hidden Power is gone, by the way. So, Infernape can't HP Ice it, Coco can't HP Ice it. So Lando can come in on both, kind of punish it by just intimidating them, not really taking much, being able to launch an EQ off. They're both weak to ground, which, thinking about it, you have to think about your defenses as well here. If they're both weak to ground, a scarfed ground type is going to hurt. So you want to have some sort of immunity to that, and some way to punish ground types. Ground types, of course, being weak to water, grass, and ice. And ground is resisted by grass and bug. Yeah, bug. And then immunities, obviously, in the form of levitate and flying types. Now, we've taken our 2 tier 1s here, so we should probably move down to tier 2. Now, let's lose those parameters we just did. Let's look for a grass type, a bug type, or a flying/levitate one, to kind of augment our core like that, make sure that ground types don't annoy us as much. Now, also thinking about speed, Coco's at 130, Infernape's at 108. Maybe we could get something in between that. It's not essential, because very few mons in that gap. Maybe look at something a little slower. I mean, speed, generally, faster is better, but you don't want to leave too big of a gap, because if you're letting your opponent run Modest on a lot of things, that extra 10% damage can hurt. Modest, Adamant, etc. I mean, looking at this, Lando would pair really well with these two, because it's a ground type, it's another pivot, it's really strong. So let's add the other Lando. I think the other Landorus is good here. I think it covers a very important speed tier, which is the approximately base 100 speed tier. It's 101, which is always useful for it. Just outspeeds some very key Pokemon like Victini, like Jirachi that you see up here, 18, 17 respectively. Outspeeds the 95s like Lele and Lyscore. Just a generally all-around great mon. Stats-wise, Landoi has good stats. It's a little less bulky than Lando T. Pardon me. But really not by much. You compare HP, obviously it's the same. You compare defense and SPDF, and like, they have the same stats defensively. Obviously Lando T has Intimidate, which lets it have more SPDF, makes it more generally mixed bulky. But Landoi is not bad at doing it. Landoi is of course without Sheer Force, just has Sand Force. Because Sheer Force is a very strong ability on it. Usually makes it Ubers, but we like to allow it in draft because it's a good kind of... You know, sometimes there's gaps in, like, niches, right? It's kind of hard to explain, but sometimes you just want to allow something because there's not really any other mon similar. Same with Greninja down here. Looking at this, you know, Greninja, no Battle Bond, no Protean. But there's not really a mon close to it, which is a good spike setter. I mean, in 14 you have Ferrothorn, obviously, and Deoxys Defense, kind of. But in 13 there's nothing, really. You know, it's really, literally nothing. And then 12, of course, you have the Diggersby here, but, you know, are you going to be using Diggersby to set spikes? Not really. Greninja's a lot better because it's a lot faster and has U-turn. But either way, we're not talking about that, we're talking about Lando. Good rock setter, decent defogger, good overall bulk. It's a lot of immunities in this mon. It's electric immune and it's ground immune, which is very important for this kind of offensive team I'm building. You see Koto's immune to Dragon, Lando immune to ground, Lando immune to electric. You know, you're getting a lot of times where, let's say a Pokemon only has electric and ground coverage. Let's say we're fighting Stunfisk. Or maybe electric Dragon, maybe you're fighting Dracozolt. Dracozolt now has to choose every single time between trying to hit Koto or trying to hit Landorus, and then it struggles to do both. Or maybe it's ground and Dragon, maybe you're fighting Garchomp. And I mean, Garchomp's a little scarier, but, you know, Lando can prevent it from spamming Earthquake. And then, you know, if you think it's going to Scale Shot or Outrage, you can take that risk on Koto. Usually you don't want to, because that's a scary one. But, it's not bad, it's not bad. Garchomp is one of the scariest mons in the format for a reason. You're not really expecting to be able to answer it perfectly defensively while picking up these offensive mons. Either way, Lando's 14. We can pick a 13 or a 12 here. Looking at what we have here, we have a Special Breaker, Mixed Breaker, and Mixed. Maybe something physical. Maybe something a little slower. Thinking about mons that we might specifically struggle to break. Lando breaks a lot, especially if you're running SD or Cut Mine. Same with Infernape and SD and Plot. Koto's a good Specs user, Infernape's a good Scarfer. Lando I is a good Scarfer as well if you need to. Just thinking about stuff like this, just thinking, okay, where can my speed tiers go? Where can all that go? You know. So I think this is actually generally fine. I think there's... Like, let's look at some of the high tiers, because that's always the best way to figure out weakness. Does this team break Celesteela? Yes, quite easily. Koto Transcendent Celesteela pretty easily. Lando I can SD on it. Infernape just blows it up. What about something like Melmetal? Well, Melmetal, similarly, Lando beats it, Infernape beats it. Koto struggles, but that's fine, Koto U-turns. Let's look at Gliscor, for instance. Gliscor's a ground type. Koto has to U-turn on it. Infernape usually has to U-turn on it. And then Lando I, it's a little weird. Lando I kind of... It's weird, you know, because Lando I kind of, you know, it's immune to Earthquake, then it has Facade. So, you know, you kind of identify that problem there of, okay, if there's a ground type that has a strong secondary typing, or generally just a strong secondary type of move that can hit Landorus, maybe a ground ice type like Mamoswine, maybe obviously the ground flying types like Gliscor and Lando T, maybe that's a problem. Maybe I need something that can either take those on defensively or offensively. Now, the team I'm building generally wants to do it offensively. So maybe we're looking at something obviously a little slower, maybe something like... Looking through here, water types here, Milotic maybe. A little less offensive than the others, can still pivot, does a very good job at answering stuff like Gliscor and Landers though, thanks to its enough speed to make these mons think about running speed. Obviously being a water type, it has access to Scald, one of the best moves in the game, 30% burn chance. Having access to Ice Beam for Lando Gliscor, having access to Scald for generally everything. You know, even against grass types, you're clicking Scald. Has Haze, of course, as well. It's a great mon all around. It's definitely a mon to consider. However, I really want to use Greninja on this team. I was talking about it earlier, and I think Gren is really good on this team for a couple of reasons. Mainly, its spikes. Currently, this team has Infernape and Landorus as rock setters. Stealth Rocks being one of the most important, if not the most important move in Pokemon. Stealth Rocks, of course, deal 1/8 of your opponent's health when they switch in. Now, if you think about it, they switch in 8 times, they're gone. You know, that's why Heavy Duty Boots, which prevents hazards damage, is such a popular item. Either way, it's also affected by rock weaknesses, so if your Charizard isn't running a Heavy Duty Booty, then it's going to die in 2 switch-ins. It's always the reason that, you know, quite a few mons are running boots, and it's important to get knockoff on your team. Which, on this team, only Landorus has right now, so maybe we'll think about that more in our lower tiers. Either way, Spikes, Spikes are light rocks, however, they start at 12%, which is done to every single type. And then it moves on to about 18% when 2 spikes are up, and then 25% when 3 spikes are up. It's an incredibly strong move, which is generally favoured if you can get more than 1 up, and Greninja, while it may not look like it, is actually very good at getting multiple spike layers up. Which, you may think, oh, but it's not bulky, it's not really going to stay in. And yeah, you're right, it doesn't stay in. It sets a single spike and leaves, and then it comes back and it does it again, and it does it again. And that's all that it does. It just sets the spike, goes, sets the spike, goes. And now you're thinking, okay, well, I'm doing at least 12% to anything that comes in. Maybe Lando sets rocks, that's 25. Let's say you're able to get 2 or 3 spikes, you know, that's already doing over 30%, close to 40. And now you're thinking, oh, Koko's faster than most things, can it do like 33%? Yes! Then you're able to beat anything that switches in, and all of a sudden, wow, you're winning the game. This team does still have, obviously, the quite glaring problem of, if you hit it, then it hurts. You know, there's good resistances here, you know, Greninja's weak to fighting, but Lando and Koko resist it. Weak to grass, but Infernape resists it. But you want bulky mons now, and that's where I like to put a lot of my points for the lower tiers, is in bulkier mons. Because I feel like high tiers, you know, the breaking power is unmatched. But in the low tiers, I mean, you know, Hippowdon's very strong as a bulky ground type, but Seismitoad's still pretty damn good. You know, that sort of thing. I'm gonna actually open something that I think, if you don't have, you should probably get, which is, let me duplicate tabs. Now go here, hopefully I'm not doxing myself, here we are. This is a matchup doc, which, for me anyway, also displays typings and speeds and etc. So I can put in Koko Infernape, Landorus Incarnate, I spelled it wrong, Incarnate, and Greninja. And I'm able to see maybe some things glaring here. Okay, everything's pivoting. Good. I've got plenty of hazards right now. Defaulters could be better. You know, it's the thing is, with rockers and defaulters, you might think, oh, 2 or 3 is enough. But you have to think about what you're defaulting with, you know? You don't want to have to put it on Lando Eye, because you want it to be doing a lot of damage with Earthquakes. Same with Coco, you want it to be U-turning all the time, you don't want it to be staying in playing Defog. It's not usually bulky enough for that. Either way, you can look at this list here, and you'll kind of notice this resistance side, this neutral side, and this weakness side. So let's have a look at what we're weak to, what we're resisting. Fairy, we have 1 weakness and no resist. That's something very important we don't have to think about. Fairy is a strong type, especially Pokemon like Clefable, Gardevoir, Tapu Lele, Tapu Fini, etc. And obviously I had Coco itself. Steel, we have a couple resists in Infernape and Greninja. Steel generally isn't the strongest offensive type, but it's still something to keep in mind, especially against something like Sizzle. Dark, we have a lot of resists, Coco, Infernape, Greninja. I think we're doing fine there. Ghost, 1 resist with Greninja, could do a bit more, but it depends on how Ghost weak we feel. Generally, Ghosts are quite frail, so Greninja should come in and take them out. It might be hard to switch into, of course, but yeah, it's usually fine. Dragon, we have no resistances and 1 immunity with Coco. Dragons can be scary. I'm going to be picking up a Dragon resistance. Bug here, Bug doesn't usually matter, like, wow, I have a Bug weakness with Greninja, it's not like every other mon on this team resists Bug or anything. Ice, we have 2 resistances, Infernape, Greninja, weakness with Lando. It's fine, could be better, could be worse. Rock, we're just neutral on it. Having a decent rock resist can be useful, rock types generally aren't the most popular, but stealth rocks can be quite dangerous. And rock coverage as well is quite strong. Psychic, we have 1 weakness, 1 immunity, could do a bit more with that. Ground, 2 weaknesses and just 1 immunity right now. We're going to be able to hit ground attacks very well, but maybe another resist, or maybe another immunity along the way. You know, Levitate is a very common ability, probably one of the most common, and it's one of the best, so it's great that it is so common. Electric, we have the immunity and the resist with Coco. It's important to keep track of electric with Coco because of its electric terrain, which boosts both sides' electric moves. Poison generally isn't that much of a worry, it's a bug. Grass, generally same. It's good to have a full-time grass resist because of Rillaboom and Kartana being extremely strong. Right now we have Infernape resisting it, which could be better. Flying types, we have Flying resist with Coco, which you may think, oh, Coco's been put on quite a bit here. But Coco's great at resist because of the fact that it's faster than what it comes in on, and then it can click Roost. So, it's weirdly, deceptively bulky, which is why it's so good. Especially against flying types, a lot of flying types don't have a way of hitting it. So Coco can come in very easily, maybe on their Hurricane or their Brave Bird, maybe they take like 40, that's scary. But then if Coco's roosting first, and you have to respect the Thunderbolt coming out, then Coco just gets to get away scot-free, and then Coco's faster than what comes in, it U-turns, and you just put him through this cycle. It's a very, very intimidating mon. Water, we could do much better with. 1 resistance, 2 weaknesses. Greninja's fine, it's because it's such an offensive team, but we're gonna want another resist down the line, maybe a bit bulkier. Fighting is fine because of Coco Lando. Could do something else, maybe. Fire, fine for now. And normal generally doesn't matter. You're gonna pick up a resistance along the way. With what I'm gonna say is our next type, which is Steel. At this point I'm thinking, what types do I want Steel type? Immediately. There's a lot of Steel types to choose from, of course. Some defensive, some offensive. I'm gonna go offensive because it's fun. Not too offensive though, of course. Just something kind of in the middle. Something a little stronger, a little slower. Metagross. Metagross is very fun. Metagross is very strong. Has 130 attack. Oops, I put that in the wrong box. Metagross. Let me thin this out so it looks better. Yeah, Metagross is great. Has really high attack, really good bulkier stats. And we go back to our resistance chart, and we just start to see that, you know, okay, fairy resist, we got it. Rock resist, we got it. Psychic resist, ooh, we got it. Grass resist, we got it. Poison resist, immunity now. We're still struggling with a couple types here, of course. Water being one of the major ones. Ghost now potentially being scary because of our new ghost weakness. Ground, of course, being very scary now. We're going to want to pick up some sort of ground resistance next. We have a lot of stealth rock setters. Could maybe do one more, but it's not essential. Greninja set spikes as well, which it will usually have the slots for. Lando Iron Toad with Defogger, probably want another Defogger. So, generally what we're looking for right now is a Defogger that's maybe immune to ground. Which is most of them, to be fair, because Defogger's given on birds. Any other types were kind of major types were missing. I would say major types were missing. None of them, really. I think we've picked up most of them. I think grass is a very important type. Poison, possibly. Ice is nice to have, but not essential. Dragon is very good. One of the most common cores in draft is a Fairy Dragon Steel core, because they cover each other defensively quite well. So maybe we look at a dragon off the ground. But most of those are quite expensive, so we'll have to have a look. There is one maybe I'm thinking of, but it kind of overlaps with another one we have, so not really what the doctor ordered. Let's have a look. Ground immunities, generally kind of bulky. Maybe grass. I'm looking at them on now, but I don't know if I should. I mean, I could. It's a speed tier as well. It's nice. It is water switching. Is it as bulky as I want though? I could go something else. Because a grass type does help us in a lot of regards right now. Looking at Rotomo, it is a levitator. It's another pivot. It's a good way of switching into water types, but it doesn't have a lot of longevity. You know, it's not a good long-term answer to water types. And if it gets burnt, it kind of doesn't last very long, which is kind of sad. So I'm also thinking about possibly going to like Serena maybe. No, Serena's not the best. Rose Raid is one I'm actually thinking about. Rose Raid is very bulky, especially. Probably one of the best strict water answers in the game. Good at answering a couple other types. You know, it's just got good special bulk. Does fill in gaps. It's not a ground resist, which is annoying. It is a grounded poison that also sets spikes. Probably not essential on this team, but it's a mod to keep in mind. It's a mod that I think is always quite useful. So let's continue looking for what in my head is a grass type right now, with possibly removal options. So maybe we can treat Delmise. You know, Delmise very strong. Very slow, this one, like just slower than anything else on the team. Doesn't have pivoting, doesn't really switch into water all too well. Decidueye is an option, it's a little faster, same speed as Metagross, so maybe not because of that. Switching into Scald's better though, and switches into EQ as well. Shaman's another thing to look at. Shaman switches into Scald's very well, Shaman switches into EQ very well. Doesn't have any other sort of outside utility, is a good Leech Seeder, but otherwise not the best. Let's just keep looking. Did I skip any up here? Not really. And this is the important thing in draft. You just gotta keep your options open. Keep thinking about things. The option is never going to be perfect. I will probably decide on one of the ones I've already listed. Just strictly because, you know, it's just sometimes not the best. Speed speaking of, yeah, I'm gonna go for Shaman, I think. Yeah, Shaman. Shaman's a bit of a weird one. Doesn't hit steals at all, but Inferno hits every steal, and Landorus hits most, so I think it's fine. It doesn't pivot. It's a little slow, not in speed itself, but in how it's played, which is a little bit of a turn-off on this team. I think Decidueye might be... Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I've convinced myself against it. Let's go Decidueye. Well, there we are. Decidueye. Good, another mixed Mon. Mon with pretty decent special bolt. You know, it's switching to Scald very well. Earthquake maybe a little less, but, I mean... Land Eye switched into it quite well anyway, and sometimes you can use your Earthquake weakness to your advantage by running Shocker on a Mon to maybe eliminate a pesky ground. It is of course also a U-turner, that makes 5 out of 6. So let's have a look now. Realistically, our resistance chart has one thing I'm not a fan of, which is that Ghost weakness, but otherwise... our ground is the other thing that's kind of a little scary, but I think we're fine. I think if I were to bring this 6 to a game, because you know you're drafting 10 Mons, but in the end you're bringing 6 to a game. If I were to bring this 6 to a game, I would feel very powerful. Decidueye is probably being forced to defog on this team. Coco can do it well, Lander can do it well, but I think Decidueye is the defogger of choice. I think you would probably on this team be running Defog Roost U-turn Leaf Storm, or something similar. Leaf Storm is great because it just hits water types extremely hard, while also being relatively accurate. Roost just gives it that longevity. U-turn obviously brings stuff in. Defog is a very important move. It removes the hazards we were talking about before. I think you probably run Spikes on this team most of the time. Probably run Rocks Metagross. You can run any sort of offensive Lando set, any sort of Inferno, any sort of Coco. I need to drink water, I'm spitting facts too much. Either way, you know, at this point you're kind of thinking of specific top tiers that maybe you don't deal too well with. Or something fun I like to do, and quite a few players like to do, is mainly for a draft season rather than the battle tower. You should look at opponents you're scared of, and then counter-team them. Let's say, for example, a team I'm looking at is quite weak to Dragon. Like, their fairy's weak. You know, if I just had a okay Dragon that could just click Outrage or click Draco, then I'd be in a much better spot. And maybe they're walled by Dragon as well. So then I would immediately say, okay, what's the strongest Dragon available to me? Flydon? No, we're not drafting Flydon. I'd rather draft Silvally Dragon. Strongest Dragon available is Goodra. And so I would pick up Goodra specifically for that one person who's kind of weak to Dragon, who I'm scared of, and maybe they don't break Goodra. There we are, good enough. You know, it's kind of just a Mon you put on instead of maybe Infernape or Lando or Coco, because they're great together, but they don't need each other, you know? You can have an Infernape on its own, it's doing good, you know, they're all self-sufficient, but, you know, good friends, you know? No codependence here, they're just confident in who they are and who their friends are. It's a great relationship. At this point, let me actually put the rest of the Mons onto this. Decidueye, Goodra, and I mean, you're running out of points here. You've got 7 Mons now. Generally, in points, I like to go for 1 less than what is required and just end on a 1-pointer. Usually it's a 1-pointer that has a lot of meaning to me. So for this specific scenario, I'm probably going to go for Magcargo, one of my favorite, if not my favorite Pokemon. He's just a funny little guy. A funny little goofy guy. You're never, if you're drafting a 1-pointer, unless you really want to just get a bunch of value, just don't expect to bring this to a game ever. You know, Magcargo is terrible one of the worst mons ever made. I would say there's 10 fully evolved Pokemon worse. Like, it's down there, okay? It has, like, one redeemable quality. So then you're left with 12 points for 2. And there's two options here. Either you go for an 11 pointer and just say, okay, I want as much power or speed or whatever as possible. Look at another counterpick type of mon. Or you say, okay, let's split the power out a little bit. Maybe we can say, let's go and look at 4, 5, 6 pointers. 7 even, and look at some, maybe types, maybe mons we're missing. You know, the Doodra pickup, we're really not missing much. Maybe a grounded poison may be useful. A lot of his team is running boots because they want to avoid hazards as much as possible, but to give them the option to run stuff like Choice Scarf, Choice Band, Choice Specs, Life Orb, etc., it is important to have a grounded poison you can bring once or twice to make sure toxic spikes don't get in the way. It's more a preventative measure than something you're going to be bringing often, but especially against Greninja, against a couple other high-tier poisons, toxic spikes is very scary. For that reason on this team, I'd probably be looking at a poison and maybe Poison Bud. There's a mon that is Poison Bud, which I would love to draft. Where is it? Here it is. That's 6, it's Venomoth. Venomoth is kind of cool. It's a Quiver Dance mon with tinted lens. So it's great at just doing damage. It is a grounded poison, which is a very good thing for it. Usually not the best, but at this tier, you're not really expecting that. You could also be looking for maybe a couple other things. Doodra is probably the best water resist on this team now, with Lando being the best round, but always good to look for more of those sorts of things. Maybe another fairy resist at this point, because now you have Doodra, that's another fairy weakness. Metagross is a great resist, mind you, and poisons themselves are another great thing, but maybe if you want something a little more like, you know, avoid Stun Tank because that's not a fairy resist, that sort of thing. How I would probably round this draft out, just looking at things, I would probably, looking at options, I'm looking for a poison type that's not flying, and then something else which has some niche use in some matchups. Something like another immunity, you know, let's look at types we don't have immunities to. No fire immunity, no water immunity, no grass immunity. We have immunities to every type that normally has immunities from types, but we don't have any ability immunities, stuff like Water Absorb, stuff like Flash Fire, stuff like Sap Sipper, so maybe look for something like that as well, low down. Generally not essential, but it's just nice to have. It's nice to be able to say, okay, yeah, you know, let's just be immune to fire against Victini, so we don't have to worry about how Doodra is kind of taking on the world here. But you kind of get what I mean. I mean, I've kind of just been rambling this entire time. But, you know, you're starting to look at the tier and you're like, okay, you know, wow, I want to make a more defensive team. I want to use Clefable. And it's like, oh, well, Clefable's weak to Steel and Poison and resist Fighting, Bug, and something else, and is immune to Dragon. What if we got Gliscor to punish Grounds and Poisons because... Sorry, Steals and Poisons because, you know, Gliscor. It's like, wow, that's a great little pairing drop there. They both set rocks, Gliscor defogs, you know, it's a good bulky little guys there. Maybe we need a water resist, let's go for my Lord. It's like, oh, we need something to do damage, let's go for Nidoking. Or Mamoswine, or let's just not double up on ground and go for Hooper Unbound. And it's like, wow, that's great, you know, I mean, it's not the most offensive team in the world, but, you know, left from our Life Orb and Gliscor and Click SD, and, you know, it's like, oh, you know, it's just a bulkier team, just switch into attacks rather than trying to U-turn out of them. That's kind of a difference between offensive and defensive teams. Offensive teams generally want to U-turn out of a move into one of their immunities or good resists. Defensive teams are fine hard switching, and because of that, they're generally lower risk, but generally also lower reward because they're a little slower, they're a little more prone to being hacked out. Hacked out being, of course, just getting unlucky, stuff like freezes, stuff like crits, etc. Yeah, I think, it's not the best of tips, but it's just something. I'm just gonna go for Venom off and Registeel. Regirock, even. Why these two mons? Grounded Poison. That's about it for Venomoth. Technically a 4 times fighting resist. It's a decent fairy resist, actually. Its Spadef is not bad. If I put this onto this funny little dot here, you'll see, 70, 75. It's not good, it's not bad, though. It says T-Spikes, which is useful. Yeah, it's default, technically. It U-turns, which is important for this team. Venomoth is just good as a... Oh, I have to prep for Venomoth. And then Regirock is also one of my favourite Pokemon. But also is another rocker. It's a good flying resist if Koga's not cutting it. Maybe it's flying poison type like Crobat. And it's like, oh, I can't switch into Crobat. But you know who can? The Rock. Let's go, baby. I'll make another one quickly without explaining my picks. I'll make it a bit bulkier. Let's think, what height did I want to use? How does Zapdos? Oh, I forgot I didn't carry this code over. This should work. Yes. Okay, I also didn't carry the sprites over. Zapdos Aegislash. Oops. Aegislash. Look at this. Fighting resistance, fighting immunity, ground weakness, ground immunity, ice weak, ice resistance, rock weak, rock resistance. I mean, there's a couple things here that still annoy it. Electric types, I think, are quite annoying for it, so let's look at options for something to do with an electric type, like, whoa, would you look at that? Thunderous Tea, maybe. But we already have an electrifying, so maybe not Thunderous Tea. Or something a little more fun, like... I mean, Amazon works, so I want to use it. Yeah, I think this team benefits from Amazon. This team, as you can see, is quite a bit slower, still has good speed. 60, 80, 100, you're not leaving too much of a gap between those speeds. You want something a little faster. But Mamoswine Aegislash break through virtually every mon. I mean, Aegislash really doesn't struggle to break anything. Mamoswine the exact same. Zapdos great offensively and defensively, fighting resist for the Mamoswine. Maybe you want to water resist now. Zapdos is great at switching into waters, but maybe it's really strong waters, it's scary. Possibly also want a dedicated fire resist. Zapdos, same sort of thing. Mamoswine, neutral to fire with thick fat, but still good. Probably want some speed as well. Looking at that, fire and water resist, could go Volcanion. Not a bad choice, not fast, but it does kind of fit this team structure we have right now. I'm tempted, but not convinced. I kind of want another mon that can pivot. Possibly Manaphy, but maybe not. I mean, this is another team I put Greninja on, honestly. Because I think this team benefits from Greninja's speed, it benefits from Greninja setting spikes. Right now, Mammoth is just setting rocks. So I'm just going to put Greninja on the other one. For the Battle Tower, you will be able to do this. You're going to be able to make as many teams as you want with as many mods as you want. In draft, you may have to worry about somebody taking Greninja before you, so you're going to have to think about prioritizing your picks. And then the rest of the team is kind of just more packaging utility. Speed goes 122 to 100 to 80 to 60. No real gaps there. It'd be nice to have something between a couple of those, but it's like not really essential. Types that struggle to switch in. I mean, still want maybe a better water resist than Greninja. This is a team I'd definitely consider Roserade on. Less than consider, I would put Roserade on. You know, you may think, oh, the double spikes, but it's fine. I only said no double spikes in this team, because I wanted to save points where I could. I didn't think Roserade was essential. Roserade is 90 base speed, slots in between Mammoth Swine and Zapdos. It's a good speed to be at, especially because Zapdos doesn't always run max speed. So it's good to have him on that in that range that can run max speed if Zapdos doesn't want to. There's not really much else I'm kind of looking for here. If I were to bring this 5, I would be feeling very good about myself. Honestly, I might put Goodra on this team as well, but no. Let's try to be a bit more original. I haven't taken high tier dragons in either of these, and once you get below 11 points, Goodra is probably your best pure dragon. You know what, yeah, no, I would just take another Goodra. I'd take another 1 point, I'm just going to put Magcargo as filler. Yeah, nope, I'm going to put Graveler, Alola. My boy. So I'm thinking, okay, 20 for 3, do I want 2 big, 1 small, 3 medium, 1 big, 2 kind of mid sort of thing? Yeah, what? I am the type of person who would say I want 2 big, 1 small, and mainly because I'm a countdown viewer. So I start looking at the 10 to 8 area, looking at mons that I might want. Is there anything I don't really break right now? Is there anything I don't switch into right now? Ice is something we might want to shore up. So, why don't we? We could go double water here with something like Vaporeon. We could go for what I'm actually going to be taking, which is Incineroar. Great bulky fire type. Good ability to intimidate. Great move pool, stuff like Parting Shot and Knockoff. It's double dark, which makes us quite weak to fighting, but when you realize that Roserade resists to special fighting types, Aegislash is immune, Zapdos is one of the best fighting resists in the game, all of a sudden it starts making a bit more sense why you'd want to double up there. Still though, it's never a problem to have maybe another fighting resist now. Looking at types, we have Fire, Water, Grass, we have a Fairy... No we don't. I always forget something, so we're probably looking for a Fairy now, because otherwise Dragon types don't do much against us. We have a Flutter to resist, we have Mammoth Swine to Revenge, but still useful to have. About 9 to 8 as a Fairy. Whimsicott's decent, but we already have a Grass type. Wheezing Galar is pretty good. We would have a Poison. We can maybe change a Roserade at this point, if we want. Mimikyu is interesting. We do have 2 Dark types, but we also have a Ghost already, so probably not. Florges is a pretty strong pure Fairy. Works well on this kind of, like, it's a mix between bulky and not, like, this is a little more of a kind of, it's an offensive team, but Still kind of balanced. To put Florges there, and you know, this is another fighting resist, this is a random resist. And now you have 2 points for something. I mean, you can make this useful if you want. There's really not much in 2 points. I would probably say... I mean, I would take another mascot, but... let's not just suggest going to 8 mons in a 10-mon draft. You should try to get value. Let's put it into add doc here, just to check our team. It also, of course, lets us check typings. We check those in, look at resistance chart. We have no bug, no psychic, no rock, no fighting, no normal. No fighting, potentially a little scary. We have strong fighting coverage with Age Slash's close combat, Mammoth White's superpower, Drudra's focus blast, Incineroar's close combat. Maybe could still have gotten a fighting type somewhere, but I think it's fine. Look at our weaknesses and resistances. Ground, we have 2 weaknesses to 1 immunity with Zapdos. Scary. Maybe. Zapdos beats a lot of ground types, which may seem weird, but its flying type and its hurricanes hit hard enough to make that work. Granger and Roserade also are stronger and faster than most ground types can deal with. Looking at other types, we're fine against pretty much everything else. And you're never going to be perfect. You know, oh, it would have a ground weak team, but you have a Zapdos. You know, some resistance is way heavier than others. Like if I were to say, oh, you know, I have 4 ice weaknesses. Oh my god, that's so bad. My ice resist is Milotic. Well, I mean, I guess it's okay. And that's a bad example because Milotic still loses to my boy Kyurem up here in 17. He's probably going to go down, but Kyurem's great at beating things it shouldn't. But yeah, 2 points. Maybe could look at a fighting type. I think the best fighting type is probably going to be like Machoke or something. Is there not a fighting type in 2? There's always a fighting type in 2. It's Phalanx. That's Sork. Whereas Sork, I'll just upgrade to him. Sork's at 4. Sork's a good fighting type. Sork is good because it has sturdy as an ability. Oh, I realized Graveler Lola isn't on there as type as points. So I actually had 8-mon draft. I guess because of that, I would drop Florges down to a 6-pointer. 5-pointer. Which in terms of fairies means Ramble. So let's consider maybe a double swap here. We could look at Arcanine at 9. Instead of Incineroar. It's definitely a worse Pokemon. But if you're having to... No, actually, yeah, you're right. You're right, interior dialogue. Incineroar is so much better, but it's just not worth it. Florges could go, though. You know, Florges is never really the best. You can also maybe look at your high tiers here. No. I mean, the only thing that could change is Roserade, but I picked up Roserade too early to want to switch it now. It's Ramble, and is there anything else? No, I've used Ramble before. I like Ramble. It's fine. You know, I'm gonna have very strong opinions on some mons. Ramble is... It can take Dragos. I mean, this team didn't need the strongest of fairies anyway because of Aegislash, but, you know, it gets the job done, I suppose. And yeah, I mean, that wasn't that much quicker than the first team. It has 2 mons overlapping. 3 if you count Mercado. Maybe that's just me as a player, and maybe that's just the list, though. You know, I tend to not really pick up my dragons too early, so I'm left waiting on stuff like Noivern and Gudra. And, God forbid, Flygon. I'm the type that likes strong electrics, as you can see. I think electric types are really good, especially ones with U-turn. I also like strong ground types and strong water types. And that's about it. Have I taught you anything? No. Goodbye.